I will now take the sediment for this meeting of the Planning Committee held on 28th May 2024. The following members are present: Councillors Ali Callison, Ralph Barker, Archie Buchanan, Ross Clark, Jerry Convery, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Colin Dewar, Mary Donnelly, with apologies from Councillor Joe Fagan. Councillor Elise Frames not present. Councillor Alistair Fulton is not present. Councillors Shalene Handybode and Graham Horn are present. Councillor Ross Lambie is not present. Councillor Martin Lennon is not present. With apologies from Councillor Monique McAdams. The following members are present: Councillors Leslie MacDonald, Dave McLaughlin, Richard Nelson, Norman Ray. Councillor John Ross is not present. And the following members are present: Councillors Graham Scott, David Shearer, Helen Toner and David Watson. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We'll just go into today's items of business. Item number 1 is any declarations of interest. No declaration of interest. Agenda item number 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. These are submitted for approval as a correct record, and these are on pages 3 to 12 in your pack. I'm happy to move that as a correct record.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 3 then is the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan Scheme 2024 and the Local Plan 3 update, and these are pages 13 to 34. Tony? Fraser? Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report is part of the statutory process for preparation of the local development plan, and in effect it's the LDP scheme is the timetable that will be followed for the next iteration of South Lanarkshire's local development plan. Appendix 1 of the report sets out the timetable as well as the engagement and consultation process that will be followed, and the annexes within the development plan scheme provide a bit more detail on the issues that will be taken into consideration in preparing the LDP as well as the additional assessments that will be undertaken. Further reports will be brought to the Planning Committee and full Council in relation to the LDP, and members will also be aware that a briefing session has been arranged for later this morning to provide an opportunity to discuss the emerging LDP and for officers to answer any questions that you may have. In the meantime, though, it's recommended that the committee approve the South Lanarkshire 2024 Local Development Plan Scheme.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. We are having a development session after the meeting, so happy to take any formal questions here, or we can do it at 11 o'clock. Councillor Allison.
Just question, I mean, it states in the policy here that we can have one or more development plans. Is there any thought in having a separate plan for the rural areas other than obviously different from the urban areas?
That's right. I just press it, Fraser.
Yeah, when we effectively, when the council approved that there would be a single local development plan for South Lanarkshire, that was an agreement that this council would only take one approach. That would need to be a further decision by committee. They would need and they would need to provide a justification in terms of why one or two local plans would be required. But certainly, it's the decision that was taken by South Lanarkshire Council. I think it was in August last year. Was that it would be one local development plan for covering the council area. It will have policies though that affect the urban and the rural area. It will look to let's sort of give a local emphasis in terms of what National Planning Framework 4 is about as well. So I think it would be an unusual approach, I think, to take in terms of to have more than one local plan for a council area. But certainly that was this council's decision last year.
Just pressure.
Just following on from that, Fraser. Things have changed substantially since then. As you said, MPF 4 has come in, and that has changed things significantly in terms of how things are looked at. So what would be the process if we were looking to change whether we had one or more development plans?
I suppose just for clarification, the decision to go with one local plan was after the approval of National Planning Framework 4. That would have to be a decision that would be taken through full council to have more than one local plan for a council area. So it would have to be subject to the political debate. There would have to be consideration on the additional cost that would come with that, and the additional cost, I would have to say, would be significant. And I'm not necessarily, it would still have to conform with National Planning Framework 4 as well. So I'm not really too sure the plan would be any different that would come on the back of that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Norman Ray, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just had a point about paragraph 4.1, where it says the next generation of local development plans will be place-based and presented as a series of maps, site briefs and master plans. I was wondering if this is indicative of a move towards a more sort of zoning-based system. I know that that's more common in some other countries, whereas here it's been a bit more flexible in the sort of British type planning system. And I wondered if that is changing now, and whether there will still be the same sort of flexibility in the new plan as there has been historically.
Fraser?
Yeah, no, I would be inclined to suggest that the place-based, map-based is more a presentational thing. I think there always is flexibility in terms of local development plans, but possibly this is an issue we could pick up at the briefing at 11 o'clock, because it may just be in terms of, like the consideration that members want to be aware of in terms of questions that might be asked, through your, by community representative as well. But I think this is more in terms of a presentation of thing, as opposed previously there were dozens and dozens of policies. This is about it's map-based. It's a bit more presentational, probably a bit more engaging as well, I would like to think.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have the brief at 11. Are we then okay to go with the recommendations that we're asked to approve?
Agreed.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 4 and 5 is applications P231372 and P231373. These are pages 35 to 54 in your pack. Fraser is going to present these two together, but we'll take the decisions separately. And this is the vacant land at Ladyacre Road in Lanark, part of the applicant of the West of Scotland Housing Association and Zoom Developments. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, these applications are related in that the P231372, it seeks conservation area consent for the demolition of a garage, but it's to facilitate the development of 39 flats with ancillary facilities on a site within Lanark Town Centre. In this respect, while the principle of residential development on this site is acceptable, there are a number of factors associated with the design, the density and the layout of the proposed scheme that lead to a recommendation for refusal. The applicant's agent has been informed on a number of occasions, including at the pre-application stage, about the deficiencies of the scheme, but there has been no reduction in the scale of the development or improvements to the layout. And it's also noted that there is an outstanding objection from the road service. The site is included in South Lanarkshire Strategic Housing Investment Plan, and as officers we are in contact with our colleagues in the Housing Service, and in this context it would be hoped that a new and an improved scheme will be brought to the Planning Committee at some point in the future. However, with regard to the two applications that are before the committee today, it is considered that there are a number of unacceptable factors in the layout and design, and that has been submitted, and that this brings the proposal into contravention with a number of local and national planning policies. As such, for the reasons set out in page 37, as well as in pages 51 and 52 of today's papers, it is recommended that planning permission should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor Graham Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Fraser for his report. I've got a number of concerns about this one. I'll start off with, as we're all aware, the Scottish Government, I think it was last week or the week before, passed a housing emergency in Scotland. And I want to pay tribute to the work of the Labour MSP Mark Griffin, who put the motion to Parliament, and the Scottish Government agreed that now we have a housing emergency in Scotland. The idea of refusing social housing at this time, when it is possible, in my own personal view, that there's a possibility of a housing emergency in South Lanarkshire, the idea of refusing social housing at this time, I think, is bewildering in one sense. Another point I want to make is Fraser has made reference to the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. I believe that is for 39 units. It's in the SHIP for 39 units, which is the exact amount which is being on the application today, and is precisely the amount being refused. Maybe it's me, and other councillors, but when we see things in the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, there's an assumption that that is a developable site for the amount that the SHIP says it is, which is 39 units. So for that to be, for what unilaterally been rejected, and I hear Fraser talking about other numbers coming back at other times, but I find that very odd in the fact that I think SHIP is, I think, one of the best documents that's been passed by this administration in the last couple of years. And I want to give full praise to David McLaughlin as Chair of Housing, and his deputy Margaret Cowie, happens to be sitting beside me, and Stephen Gibson for all the excellent work they've done on SHIP. If there's one document in the last couple of years that is giving hope about addressing the housing shortage in South Lanarkshire, it's the SHIP. And I think the SHIP should be, the numbers in SHIP should be kept to, because I think that's what the public want. Another one is the negative impact that this development will have on St Mary's Church, which is a Grade A listed building. Obviously, it's of such an impact that the diocese who own St Mary's Church don't appear to have a problem because they are selling the land here. They don't have a problem with the impact on St Mary's Church. So I find it very odd, and I think that I want to give due praise to the diocese. They could easily have just sold this land to the highest bidder, and it could be very fancy housing in there, but it isn't. They've done a socially responsible thing and done a deal through West of Scotland Housing Association for 39 social housing units that I assume are desperately needed in Lanark, as they are desperately needed all over South Lanarkshire. So that's the 3 points of concern that I have with this application. I've got, if you could let me back, obviously, after my next question to Fraser, is that I take the point about the outstanding roads objection. Could Fraser detail them and see if they are not insurmountable in terms of getting an agreement at some point, going back to the applicant and getting agreement so that at some point in the future a consent could be given for social housing? My instincts here are to, and that's why I want to come back to me, Chair, is maybe send this one back and ask for a deferment until we get these problems sorted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And I think, going back to some of your comments just before I bring Fraser in, I think we're all in agreement that we require social housing, and there is a national emergency that's been called, and I don't think MD in this room will disagree with that statement. But I think what is doesn't fit with that surrounding, and I think for the future, I think we need to look at the future beyond that. We need to take everyone in its own merit, and we need to provide a decent level of amenity in social housing. And I think this one doesn't. What we're saying is, come back to us. We are willing to work with you. The officer are willing to work with you to get something for that social housing. But 39 units does not fit within there. And I think going forward for the future will give us more concerns going forward. But I'll bring Fraser in just to answer those questions that you have, and then I'll let you come back in, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would reiterate exactly what you said there in terms of the desirability of developing this site for social housing. The difficulty we've got with this one, though, is that the design and the proposal that came forward just isn't acceptable on planning grounds. We have been in discussion with our colleagues in housing, and we are more than happy to consider a revised scheme for this site here. It's a good location. It's just that the layout and the design that's been presented to us is not acceptable. In terms of the SHIP scheme, the SHIP is effectively a financial budget that sets, in terms of what the housing investment plan is, and that the financial project, or the financial proposal that's going forward here is for 39 dwellings. That doesn't come into consideration in terms of a planning application. So what there are two separate processes here that you would expect. That there's the financial budget projections, but then there is the considerations that would need to be taken forward in terms of the assessment of a planning application. That financial budget can still stay here, but whether or not it's at 39 houses or it's a slightly reduced number, that's something we're open to talking to the RSL about. We're willing to talk to the developer about it. We have sought revisions to the scheme. We had suggested about withdrawing and coming back in with a revised proposal, but the applicant, but for whatever reason, the applicant developer wasn't willing, and that's why we have to present this recommendation to the committee today. It does allow us to regroup. It does allow us to consider a revised proposal. I think as a planning service, we would be keen to see this site developed. And I know from talking to colleagues in housing, they're keen to see the site developed as well. But it's just as it stands just now, within the context of a housing emergency, it's not housing just at any cost. It needs to protect the amenity of the future residents. It needs to be in keeping with the surrounding area. This scheme wasn't, but we're more than happy to discuss a revised and an improved proposal.
The other, Fraser, without the roads, to give me a breakdown of the roads objections here, so that if I do move a deferment, that there's potential common ground, no pun intended, in terms of getting an agreement with the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've had a look at this one. Obviously, the shortfalls in the development are in relation to the level of parking on the site. So there are 4 spaces short. There's also no footway provision shown, so it's not clear how pedestrians would get out onto Lady Acre Road safely within the development site. They're really the main points of objection. The other items in relation to site access, they are acceptable, or they could be acceptable. I believe there's a plan that's been submitted now that shows that the safety audit that was carried out, the measures that have been done, address those, so that is addressed. But it's really the internal side of it. I think there would need to be a slight change of layout to see how the 4 spaces could be accommodated. But we'd be very open to looking at other ways to try and get the parking implemented. The other relatively minor point is the services, how they would come into the site, because the road itself sits right on the boundary, so there would be no space for a service strip. However, if the layout was amended, then there is a possibility you could get the service strip in.
Thank you. I bring in Councillor David McLaughlin, please.
Thanks, Chair. A lot of what I would have said has already been said by my colleague, Graham Scott. I was really surprised when I seen the recommendation, but having listened to what Fraser has described about the application itself, it's given me a bit of concern about what we had drawn up in the SHIP and what is actually available to be approved within planning. Now, Fraser's made the point that, when the SHIP is looked at and the numbers are discussed, it's not a planning proposal. I suppose it's like an estimate, but the final outcome will need to get approved by planning. But my question, Chair, is about Graham Scott's proposing a deferral on this one. Now, I would like some clarity on what the difference is from the refusal or a deferral, because I know that Fraser has just said that they're willing to discuss with the applicant to come back in. What does it actually mean? Because I thought that when an application was refused, you couldn't look at it again for a period of time. Maybe I'm getting that one wrong. My planning knowledge isn't the best, but could I get some clarity on that? What does it actually mean if it's refused today, or what's the difference of refusing and deferral? Fraser, please.
Yeah, no, not wanting to put words into Councillor Scott's mouth in terms of, I'm assuming in terms of a deferral, we'd be looking for a change to the scheme to come forward that makes it acceptable from planning grounds as well as from roads grounds. And I would be inclined to think that the proposal as submitted today, that the changes would be such that it would be effectively a new application that would be coming forward. I think what we're suggesting in terms of a refusal is the applicant then can come back in with a new proposal. That would be subject to the full consultation around it. There's no bar in terms of coming in. There's no restriction in terms of coming in with a new proposal. But I think what we're suggesting is what's presented to us today is unacceptable. It's not as if there are minor tweaks that can be done to make it acceptable. It needs to have a considerable kind of rehaul around it. And we'd be more than happy to have discussions with the applicant around that to try and get the numbers onto it, to get something that's acceptable in terms of the layout, the privacy, the overlooking, the access into it as well. But that's, so this wouldn't, no, it wouldn't stop development on this site. But it's the current proposal as presented is not acceptable, but we're more than happy to discuss an alternative, and that would be through a new and revised planning application.
Thank you, Fraser. I think you're absolutely right. We're not against the development of the site. I think that has to be first and foremost. That's not against the development of the site. We just need to go back, if I'm getting that right, Fraser, to look at it in a more pragmatic way. So we're not against the development of the site. We realise this is a good development site, but it needs to fit, and it needs to be fit for purpose. Councillor McLaughlin, do you want to come back in? I don't know if you're frozen.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. I did freeze for a moment there while Fraser was speaking. Regarding the parking numbers, I remember a similar application, and Bernard was dealing with this one that was down in Douglas Street in Hamilton, where it was Clyde Valley Housing Association application, where the parking spaces was something that was questionable for me and other members. Now, Fraser, the roads Fraser, has spoke about the parking. What is the number of parking spaces as compared to actual units? If you could give me that, please. I know it'll be in the report, but just saves me diving through it. Thanks, Chair.
Fraser?
Sorry. Yeah, there's 28 spaces shown on the plan, and we would require 32 spaces, and that's using a rate of 0.8 spaces per unit. So that's why there's a concern, I think, at the one in Hamilton area. I can't remember the name of the street now. It was 0.8. I think they managed to get 100% or 1 for that.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barker, please.
Thanks, Chair. Don't know if I'm helping with this, but we either have a conservation policy or we don't. And once we have a conservation policy, we've got to look at it very, very carefully. And apparently nobody is saying the site can't be developed, but this is not, the development that's required. And really, just because somebody has realised there's a housing emergency, surprise, surprise, but there are still houses being demolished in Clydesdale, so I don't know just how much of an emergency it is. But just that my view is we have a conservation policy, we've looked at it, there are options, and that's really what we should stick with. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barker. We'll note those comments. Councillor Watson and Councillor Shearer, if anybody else would like to come in, could you please indicate now? Councillor Watson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Listening to what officers are saying, is the issue here actually the number of units that are trying to get squeezed onto the site? I mean, I know Councillor Scott mentions that, that it's a number that's in the plan, but at the end of the day, is that a realistic number to get into the site to meet planning policies if we want to consider roads, parking, overlooking, shadowing, all the rest of it? And because it seems to be the biggest issue seems to be block 3 here. So is it a case of it needs to be taken back and resubmitted, but with less units in it that would make it more amenable for open space and all the rest of it? Or is it still possible to get the number of units that we're talking here shoehorned into that site? Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I'll ask Fraser to come in, but my understanding is yes, I think it's a number of units to try and squeeze into that development site is given the issue. But from a planning perspective, I'll ask Fraser just to confirm, but that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, no, councillors, it is effectively a shorthand way of saying that. I think it's an overdevelopment of the site. That in itself can sometimes be resolved, and that's what we've been trying to engage with the developer around to come up with a revision of the scheme. But it's been presented and hasn't been changed along the way, and that's what leads us to this recommendation for refusal. Picking up issues in terms of the conservation area, yeah, that's what it brings it in. It's not an appropriate design in terms of a conservation area. There are issues around play and open space. There's issues around overlooking, there's issues around privacy, there's issues around access. There are a number of issues that lead us to this recommendation for refusal. It's not great, in terms of, it's unfortunate that we've got to the position where we're recommended for refusal, but that's why we're happy to come back and see a revised scheme for this site, and hopefully that's something we'll bring back to this committee with a different recommendation at some point in the future.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Watson. Councillor Convery?
Yep. Thanks, Chair. And just to reiterate, so everybody's totally clear, we are certainly not opposed to public sector housing. I've argued it for all my life, and we should be building quality stuff for people. But if you go to item 5, which is part of the same proposal, it's 3.6. Upon submission, with no further discussion in late 2023, the applicant was contacted on several occasions to try and seek a reduction in the scale of the development. So the planning department have done their job diligently. They've tried to get people to sit around a table and come to a conclusion that we build public sector houses in that space. But as Fraser alluded, we're not just going to build public sector houses for the sake of ticking a box, because folk at the end of the day have got to live in their houses, and it's got to be made sure that basically when they do that, there is no confrontation with parking and roads access and pavement access. So it's not getting put out the door, and we've lost that site for housing. That is a housing site, will continue to be a housing site, but we just need more clarification and cooperation for the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Convery. Councillor David Shearer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Right. Thank you, Chair. It's just to take this argument a wee bit further forward. Clearly, everybody is in favour of social housing. That's not the issue here. The issue is obviously what's right for this site. Now, maybe we should have something similar to like SHIP Plus, whereby that the housing department and the planning department have sat down, designed the site to go forward with what's acceptable to both departments, and therefore either when the council or one of our social landlord partners come forward, you've virtually got a plan that you can take off the shelf and implement straight away. I think that would speed up the delivery of social housing, and it would resolve issues that we've got here today, where we have a developer who either, for I don't know for what reason, is unwilling to cooperate with the departments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. I'll just ask Fraser just to come in on the back of that. Fraser?
Yeah, I completely agree with that approach, Councillor. And actually, we have a monthly meeting with my colleague within housing. We discuss the proposals that are coming forward. We look about flagging up some of the planning issues that might exist. Similarly, there's the investment plan as well. We need to make sure that marries up with the planning considerations. We have a very positive and proactive engagement with colleagues in housing, and that's delivering our own social housing stock as well as those of RSL partners as well. We'll continue to do that, and hopefully that will bring a bit more clarity in terms of the delivery of the SHIP as well. So no, I completely agree with that approach, but it's actually something that's underway already in terms of very close engagement between us and housing colleagues.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll bring in Councillor Handybode and then we'll bring it to a
Hi there. Hi, Chair. Thank you. It was really just to echo what Graham Scott has added. Is there an opportunity to defer it with a timescale for the applicant to come back with a revised plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Handywood. I think what Fraser was saying was if we did go for a deferment, it'd end up a new application anyway because of the changes it would require. So you couldn't change that application that's there. It would need to be a new application anyway. So therefore, the deferment, in my opinion, would probably, it wouldn't make any difference. I think we need to refuse it and ask the applicant to come back in and speak to planners on a way forward to reduce the units and get social housing on that site that we require, and that is fit for purpose. Fraser, you want to clarify? Okay, agree. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, just before removing to any recommendations, I hope I could probably speak on behalf most of the planning committee and just say that we look forward to seeing a revised proposal for this site coming back to us at the earliest opportunity. Yep. I think we all need to see a site that is new for social and affordable housing in South Lanarkshire, and when this is an existing community such like Lanark and a town centre location, then it has to be welcomed. However, we cannot just accept housing that is not fit for purpose with its surroundings, and more importantly, it does not provide a decent level of amenity for the future residents of that area. I can only support our officers here in their attempt to get an improved scheme on this site, and while I am sure that they will also be disappointed at having this recommendation put to the committee, I am therefore glad, however, that they remain in discussion with our revised proposal, and through these discussions we will ensure that we get a high quality example of social housing in Lanark that can be delivered. That would be my recommendation, and I will move forward with the recommendation as to refuse.
And I'll second it, Chair.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I've given you the warning of, for want of a better word, of what I'm proposing to do. I take the points that have been made so far, and the one comforting thing is that everybody on this committee and every councillor in South Lanarkshire Council is committed to social housing. I have no doubt of that, and that will always remain. I find the idea of, I think the refusal of a social housing application should be not the first resort, but the last resort. And that's why I think we have to go the extra mile and try and get a potential agreement with this current applicant. If it doesn't work out, and I hear what Fraser's saying, but I think we've got to go the extra mile and make one final attempt. Because I think in the current climate with a housing emergency, the idea of a public refusal of any social housing application does not look good. The optics are terrible. So that's why I'm prepared, well, hopefully I'll get a seconder, but I'm prepared to move deferment on the grounds that negotiations with the applicant continues, and the negotiations in terms of resorting the ongoing roads problems that surround the site. If that's good enough for the clerk for a deferment motion, an amendment.
Okay.
I'm in your hands, Chair.
I'm just looking for a seconder for Councillor Graham Scott. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Watson. Hang on a wee second.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. We're dancing in the head of a pin here. I'm taking from what Fraser's saying that there's next to no difference between refusal and deferral, because a refusal is a new application comes in, and basically we seem to be far away from tweaking with this application. So to defer it, and Fraser's basically saying he's really going to need a full new application. So if we refuse it, there's nothing to preclude the current applicant coming back in. I think we've already heard today. So I'm not seeing the difference between a refusal and a deferral unless somebody can explain that to me. And I say, it looks as if we're dancing in the head of a pin here for some reason.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. I think my understanding is, I think if we defer it, it's going to come back exactly the same as we have here just now, because planning officers have tried to engage to get somewhere before we get to here. So we've tried that already. We couldn't get to that point. That's why it came here as a refusal. Because we need the new application to come back in. So I think if we do defer it, I think we'll come back here at the next planning committee saying we need to refuse this and go for a new application. That's my take on it. I could be totally wrong, but that's my take on it from here, is that if we defer it, we're going to come back because we can't get to that agreement. The planning officers have tried and didn't succeed. So therefore, yes, we want this as social housing, but they need to come back in with a new plan, a new area, the new plan to fit in that area. That's exactly what we need, because I think deferring it is just going to kick the ball down the road and it's going to come back here. But we want to see this site developed sooner rather than later, rather than play ball for the next few months. Councillor Handybod.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to second Graham, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Handybod. Councillor MacDonald has already seconded that.
Oh.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor McLaughlin, then we'll go straight to the vote. Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Thanks, Chair, for allowing me back in. This is difficult. I'm sitting here as Chair of Housing. I don't have an interest as such, but I am as interested as anybody in developing social housing, in particular in the location that this place is in Lanark. It's town centre living. It's just exactly what we need. However, the points that my colleague Graham Scott is making, I fully sympathise with what Graham is saying, but you know, Fraser has dealt with that. You know, the site as it stands isn't going to work. So to come back and revisit it and try and tweak it in some way. I've listened to Fraser and I agree. I've listened to yourself, Chair, and I agree, and I think that is the right way. So this is a difficult one here. You know, everybody is wanting the same thing. Everybody in this committee is looking for the same thing. And I'm going to go back to Jerry Convery's point. We want to have housing, of course we do, but we want to make it work. We can't just cram as many units as we can just to get into, you know, for the sake of the developer getting as many units in there. But you have to think about the quality of life for the people who's going to be living there. Now, there is a question mark about the ship and what's been discussed here at planning. And I'm comforted by what Fraser says about the dialogue that takes place between himself and his counterpart at housing, Sharon Egan, and I've actually discussed this with Sharon because it did give me concern, as I've seen in the report, that it is in the ship area. But getting back to Jerry Convery's points, we need, if we're going to approve something, we need to make it something that's desirable and something that people are going to enjoy living in, instead of just cramming people in. I really don't think that's the right way to go for it. So I'm sorry, I can't support the amendment. I'm going with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. I think you're right. It is a very difficult one, and I'm sure every one of us in here find that very difficult to swallow this morning. But I think you're right as well. It's a town centre living. That site is a good site, and we do want to see it developed into social housing. And I'm sure going forward with the work with the officers, I'm sure that will happen. Therefore, I'm going to take this to the vote. We do have an amendment from Councillor Graham Scott, seconded by Councillor MacDonald, so we will now go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. And just to point out as well, at the moment this decision is just for item 4 on the agenda. So the motion proposed by Councillor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Convery, is to refuse planning permission for the reason detailed in the report. And the amendment is to defer, proposed by Councillor Scott and seconded by Councillor MacDonald, is to defer the application on the grounds that negotiations continue with the applicant. The vote is now live, and I would ask if members could please indicate their preference.
And a request, if you haven't voted, you vote now. We're still waiting on a couple of people voting, so if you haven't voted, can you please do so now?
Can I just clarify as well, please, Councillor Ross? I know you joined the meeting. I'm not sure if you joined before the consideration of this item or not. If it was after consideration of the item began, then you obviously can't vote on this particular item.
Okay, Councillor Ross can't vote, so we'll go straight to the...
Okay, 11 members have voted in favour of the motion and 8 have voted in favour of the amendment. I therefore declare the motion carried.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, we'll need to do exactly the same. Can you bear with us just to open the voting to go for agenda item number 5, please? Are members happy to take the vote as is for agenda item number 4, or would you like to take the voting in agenda item number 5 exactly the same?
Yes.
All agreed for agenda item number 4? Therefore, we refuse. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll then move on to agenda item number 6, please, which is application P231543. And that is pages 55 in your pack. It's a demolition and rebuild of 2-storey dwelling house, 9 Sunningdale Wynd, Bothwell. And I'll ask Fraser just to present, please.
Okay. This application relates to a residential area originally constructed as self-build plots accessed by a 2.5 metre wide public road in Bothwell. The applicants had initially submitted a proposal to extend the property. However, this was revised when it was recognised that demolition and rebuild was more cost effective, and neighbour notification was carried out again to allow further comments. 29 separate letters of objection have been received, and these are all on the Council's webpage and been summarised in section 7 of the report that is presented to members, and relate to issues around the impact of construction, loss of light and privacy from neighbouring properties, and that the proposal is out of keeping with the surrounding area. This application was initially considered by the Planning Committee on March 12th, and the applicant was asked for more information in relation to traffic and site management during construction. The details of this have been summarised in paragraphs 10-13 of the report in front of members, and subject to the imposition of conditions, it is considered that disruption caused by construction traffic would only be for a temporary period, and that this in itself would not render the proposals unacceptable. In assessing the proposals against the relevant national and local planning policies, it is considered that the development complies and that there are no overriding considerations that would lead to a recommendation for refusal. Therefore, in conclusion, it is considered that application P231543 should be approved, subject to the conditions set out on pages 60 and 61.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Maureen Devlin.
Just a couple of, well, one of the questions is, and I do have the thing from the architect's traffic management statement. It's all very well turning around and saying about how it's only going to be 20 minutes whenever this is getting delivered and that's get delivered. There's actually nowhere in this document that says where the workforce are going to park. Unless you're really familiar with this street, it is a single track street. There is no pavements on it in this particular part where this application is. I have asked for a site visit on 3 occasions and I've just been completely ignored with regard to this, because I think I would like somebody to explain to me how we're going to be able to do this without creating public safety, without really causing unsafe for the public round about. Now, there is no through road. When you look at the map of it, even that map that we do, it looks as though it's a continuation. It's not. It's a footpath once you get past a small roundabout. So what I'm requesting is that there are a site visit to let the the committee see how difficult it will be to demolish a house and rebuild it without affecting public safety within this area. Thanks, Chair.
Fraser, I'll ask Fraser come in first. Thank you.
That subject to the meeting on the 13th of March, that was the questions that we asked of the applicant and of the developer. What they come back with was a reasonable proposal in terms of an acceptable proposal in terms of how they'll manage the site. There's a large driveway that sits to the front of the site. It's on a large plot itself. There'd be the similar sort of level of disruption you would get with an extension to a house as well. There was nothing that was presented to us that caused any issues in terms of the planning consideration. There was from a roads traffic consent. There wasn't any issues that would lead us to change the recommendation. Officers have visited the site. Officers from planning as well as from housing have visited the site and they're acceptable in terms of the proposals that are presented to us. So that's why I think in terms of the original recommendation we made in March, there's no change in terms of what's been presented to us. We've been able to add conditions that we can monitor and we can seek to apply, and that's what we've presented in terms of the change to the report that's brought to members today. But it still stands that the principle of this development and the details provided are acceptable.
Councillor Devlin.
Can I ask then where the workforce are going to park? At the front of the building where they're storing all the material, where are the workforce going to park? There is no access in this road. I know it's because I'm familiar with the street, and it's not because of any other reason. It is a difficult site to develop. I know you're saying it's not, but the practicalities, the residents will probably have planning on speed dial with the amount of obstruction that's going to be created round about the area. And I did ask for a site visit, and I'm still to get somebody to tell me why I wasn't granted a site visit. Thanks.
Fraser, or Fraser, sorry.
In terms of, I don't see any change in terms of a narrow public road. This would be the same in terms of whether it was an extension to a property, whether it was a new build on a property. The issues in terms of how the staff will access that came, and how the workers will access that was presented in terms of the traffic management plan. As I say, it's a large plot. You get a level of disruption on any construction that would happen. There's one of the houses at the end, I think, round where the roundel is, that carried out significant works in recent months. And this is of a similar nature as well. So I don't think it was really any change of plan. Regarding a visit from officers, we'd suggested about having a meeting with you, Councillor. Having a meeting on site with a number of officers, we would have to have opened that up to every local member around that. You end up then having almost like a public debate, which is probably not an appropriate way to deliver the consideration of a planning application. But that's why it was a request in terms of to give us the information that was information into us as officers that allow us to carry out that assessment, and it didn't throw up any issues that we felt changed the recommendation we present to committee.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes,
you can hear me.
Yep.
I'm taking on board the point that Maureen's raising. So I feel we as councillors have got a duty of care, and if the points Maureen's raising, why can't we have a site visit and then come back and discuss this? If we're asking for it, we should be able to be awarded that.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. We would need to have a vote for a site visit, so it's not a given that we just go for a site visit. Right. So I think we would need to take that to a vote. Okay. Councillor Alec Allison, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually looking at the conditions and taking on board what Councillor Devlin's saying. Could we be stricter in what we're looking at? In the past, we have times when deliveries can and can't be made. Can we state that no vehicles engaged with working on the site should be parked on that road? Is there an opportunity for covering the points raised by condition?
The terms of the conditions, I believe, give us that control around it. One thing that Fraser was mentioning today is there actually is parking for 5 vehicles within the site, so that would be the workers' traffic. There are within the traffic management plan, it indicates about the level of vehicles that would be there per day, the times that skips would arrive as well. There are restrictions under the health and safety restrictions that would limit the hours that they would be operating as well. So as far as it stands in terms of, there's also a condition there about dilapidation so that we can be reassured that the public road will be repaired and will be brought back to an acceptable standard to us as a council so that there isn't a public cost around this. So from my position in terms of planning conditions, this gives us an adequate degree of control that ensures that the impact from construction will be minimised. There will be a degree of disruption that happens as a matter of course, but it wouldn't be at a level that would lead us to a recommendation for refusal.
Councillor Maureen Devlin, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to request a site visit. I haven't asked for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Devlin. Moving for a site visit. Is there MD to second Maureen's? Councillor Mary Donnelly.
Second that request.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Okay, any further amendments? I will refuse, I will then go for to grant subject to conditions.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have an amendment from Councillor Maureen Devlin that we go for a site visit. Seconded by Councillor Mary Donnelly. I will ask Stuart just to confirm and then we will lead to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, as proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery, the motion is that the application of planning permission be granted subject to conditions detailed in the report. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Devlin, seconded by Councillor Donnelly, that a site visit be arranged. The vote is now live. If I could ask members to please indicate your voting preference. I think there's still one member. Thank you. All members have now voted, so I'm now closing the vote. 7 members have voted in favour of the motion and 12 members have voted in favour of the amendment, which I declare carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, agenda item number 7. There are no items of urgent business. Therefore, can I remind members that there is an awareness session taking place in 5 minutes' time on the Local Development Plan 3 in Committee Room 1 and also via Teams. And we hope you all attend. And can I ask the clerk now to stop the recording of the meeting and see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm not going to the. I can't go to the. There's no chance I will make any. My diary is faulty.
Nobody's forcing you to go.
I can't go.
See the awareness session. See the awareness session. Tony emailed me on Friday saying that it's not to be recorded. No, it's not to be recorded. Right. The wee chap that says it's